content. And no, I'm not going to ask if you want to stay later because I think that the facility is taken. But I do want to know, I can emphasize more of the systematic phonics pieces and those answers to your kids' questions. Or I can go on more and give you some specific ideas about the different components of summer reading camp. Or I can talk more about vocabulary development and morphology. Vocabulary development, okay. Vocabulary, that's one. I can probably take another one. I can also probably talk more about reading comprehension. I kind of feel like skipping a little bit of the higher order reading comprehension at the moment, but is that something you all want right now, or what would be the best? Rules and reasons, vocabulary development. Okay, and then we'll just see what we get to in a couple of the other things, because I think timing-wise, we have a lot. In the 4-day session, we will have time for all of this, so please sign up for the session in June if you would like to attend that. So even though there's a number of spots empty, maybe those are people who had to leave early, we're going to go ahead and get started. What was that? Oh, okay. So I wanted to go through this little section to explore a few more of the rules, and then we're going to jump ahead to morphology. So this phonogram says two sounds. It says k and s. And when does it say s is in sense, center, cell, and absence? Before an E. How about in circus, pencil, cinema, cider? Before an I. How about in cylinder, cycle, cypress, bouncy? Before a Y. And what does it say before an A or U is in cat, cop, and cut? What does it say before consonant is in clap, act, and picnic? What does it say at the end of the word in arc, toxic, and comic? So the rule, and you could have the kids distill this, is the C always softens to S when followed by an E, I, or Y. Otherwise, C says K. And this explains words like circus, where the C says two sounds. Why does it say S at the beginning? It's before an I, and in the middle, it's before a U. And this word explains more than 10,000 words where the C says K, and more than, I think, 6,000 where the C softens to S, and more than 10,000 where the C says K, and there are virtually no exceptions. You'll also notice with these words that many of them are multi-syllable words, many of them are content words, and many kids plateau with reading around 4th grade because they don't have the ability to decode multi-syllable words. This rule is essential to those words because it has words, it explains things that happen in many of these larger words. It also happens that all of these words are Latin roots. So this rule occurs, in addition, it occurs in Spanish, it occurs in French, and it occurs in Italian. There's a slight difference with Italian. The C actually softens from K to Ch. And so words like cello and concerto, all those musical terms are Italian words. The C is softening to Ch in those words, as it does in Italian. And speakers of those languages will know that happens in their language, and then they are able to approach English and other languages and use that. The English speakers are notoriously bad second language learners. We have that reputation around the world, and I think part of that's because of the way we learn our language. So when we learn things like this, we're not just learning things that are relevant to English, we're learning skills and tools to analyze and become better second language students as well. Now, this rule, I need to share this story with you because it's one of the most powerful things that happened to me. I was sitting at my desk writing one day, and I got a phone call, and this gentleman said, "My name is LaDawn," and there's sirens in the background, and he said, I'm in LA, and I just watched your video on YouTube, and I need to tell you my story. So a presentation that's like an hour long that explains some of the rules is on YouTube, and he had just watched it. And he said, when I was in elementary school, I couldn't read, and I struggled with reading, and it was just like you said, I felt really ashamed. And he said, as school went on, I became more and more discouraged, and I hated school, and so I dropped out of school and I began gangbanging. And he said, I ended up in prison, and while I was in prison, I had a religious experience and I met the Lord, and so I wanted to clean up my life. And when I left prison, I joined an organization, a nonprofit, that went to speak to kids in public schools about why it's important to stay in school and not join gangs, and to try to help kids understand where this had led me. And he said, but I've always felt like such a hypocrite, because as I go around speaking to kids, I have failed my GED 5 times because I can't read. And this is what he said, and I am not kidding you. He said, but do you know that rule C softens to before an E, I, or Y? Do you know how much that's going to help me? And then he went on and listed all his favorite rules. And he said, I really want to try the GED again. Do you know anyone who can tutor me? Wow. Do you see the hope that arose up in a man who was really beaten down by this issue? And I never heard the end of his story. I didn't know anyone in LA to tutor him. And I really hope that someday we can develop a network that's broad enough that I could go, oh yeah, that person knows this. Go talk to them. Now, I want to show you why this is also relevant to you, because it's one thing to hear it's relevant to those who struggle, but these things will help you as strong language learners too. So, have you ever wondered, why do we add a K to picnic to make picnicking? What would it say without the K? It would say picnicine. The same thing with mimic. What would it say? Mimicing. Why do we add a K to panic to make panicky? So it doesn't say panacea. How about garlic? So it doesn't say garlicy. So, how many of you in the room are strong spellers? A number of you. Not the whole room. Look, it's not the whole room. Even though you're a lot of strong readers, you are not all strong spellers. Let me tell those of you, just very gently, that are strong spellers and strong readers, those of us who are strong readers, who read a lot, didn't learn how to spell because we didn't, I'm messing this up. But even though some of us are strong readers and we read a lot, we still didn't learn how to spell. Reading a lot didn't solve it for us. Do you see that? And by the way, those of you in the room who are like me, that's okay. I actually have solutions for you. But I want to talk to you for a moment, the strong spellers in the room. How many of you who are strong spellers, raise your hand again, have to see a word to know if it's spelled correctly? By the way, do you see it's all the same people? So you are relying on visual memory. Those of us who don't have strong visual memory struggle with spelling, because our system relies on visual memory for spelling. How many of you who are strong spellers think that garlicky looks weird? A whole bunch of you are nodding your heads. Do you now know why it's correct? Yes. So even those of you who are strong spellers benefit because now you know why. Usually you're just relying on it looks right. Those of us who are not strong visual learners benefit because now we know why and now we can spell it correctly. Another question about this, just for you to help place this and hit it home. How many of you in the room, when you have been writing, have had the perfect word and you type it and spell check doesn't recognize it? But it doesn't end there. You type it again and spell check still doesn't recognize it. Some of you are nodding. You type it a third time and spell check still doesn't recognize it, and then you're feeling kind of dumb. And then you change the word. Right? Okay. I used to think that I was alone, so I would hide this. But I've since discovered this is a universal experience of English speakers. We actually say to our students that the answer to your problems with spelling is spell check. But spell check's limiting our vocabularies because we don't know the linguistic tools to even get it close enough for spell check to recognize it. Here's what happened to me. I was a terrible speller. In graduate school, I was such a terrible speller. I'm going to tell you how bad I was just so you all feel encouraged. I would actually turn off spell check when I was writing a paper. This is for you, Baron. This is my confession to Baron. I would turn off spell check when I was writing a paper because all of those red lines were so discouraging and they distracted me from the content. And then I would have to spend at least an hour or two, depending on the length of these papers, because sometimes I wrote very long things, and I would have to dedicate time to spell checking my paper. Some of you may or may not be here. Those of you who are not here, just trust me, I'm not alone. Guess what happened when I learned the rules in phonograms as I was teaching remedial reading? Something magical happened. I could turn spell check back on, and as it underlined a word, I could go, oh, must be the other spelling of A, and on I go, and it didn't interrupt my flow of thought, and I have not thrown out a word for several years. Why did that help me? Because now I have the tools to use my tools. And I'm a strong language student. So I just want to encourage you that this isn't just for your struggling readers. This is going to help you. It's going to change how you interact with language. I'm going to skip this one. I want to show you this one, though. How many of you have taught shun? Or no shun? Does this create confusion for any of you? You're all laughing because confusion ends in S-I-O-N, not an exception. There are 3 Latin spellings of sh. This says sh. This says, and this says, and it says another sound. It says zh. What's the difference between sh, zh? Voiced and unvoiced pair. This is the only way to spell zh in English. If you hear zh, how is it spelled? That's a very useful thing to know. Another helpful tip for you is to know which spelling of sh to use. You can often look to the root. Why do we use SI in expression? Express ends in a. How about, why do we use CI in facial? Face has a C, space, spacious. Do you see the pattern? Not all English words with the Latin spelling of sh have an English root, but this works 100% of the time if you know the Latin roots. There's always a reason here. And so the ending is actually not T-I-O-N. The actual suffix is I-O-N that we're adding, and that's just a little tip. Okay. Most of us know this rule. Cat becomes Kate, pet, Pete. Everyone know this? The vowel says its name because of the E. Very, very important. It explains 50% of silent final E words. What's the problem? What are you saying 50% of the time? That's an exception. But you already know from today's lecture why there's a silent E in have, give, mauve, solve, comprehensive. Why is there? English words do not end in V. Every time you hear a V, you must add an E. Every time. Kids care about this. It makes it so much simpler. Would you rather memorize the about 2,000, I can't remember, words where that end in VE as exceptions, or would you have rather been told this when you were 5, if you hear V at the end, add in E? Wouldn't that be easier? And why do we have a silent final E in true blue value continue? English words do not end in U. So, I love this picture. What's going on? This gentleman is drilling sight words. This little boy is misreading have as have again and again. The gentleman does not look very happy. The boy does not look very happy. How could we solve this problem? We can just say to him, you know what? The vowel's not there to make, the silent E is not there to make the vowel say its name. It's there for its second most common reason. English words don't end in V. And the problem is solved, and we have a reason, and we can go on. Why is there a silent final E in choice, commerce, force, absence, and voice? What would this say? Choik. Why? I'll skip this one. So the third most common reason is the C says and the G says J because of the E, which I would have gotten to. So these are only 4 of the 9 silent E rules. And you can read about the rest of them in the book that you were given. But do you see how this information will solve problems you are facing daily in the classroom? If you give and you arm these struggling readers with this information, they have new tools. All right, last problems I'm going to solve for your spelling today relate to drop the E when, dropping E's. How many of you learned the rule, drop the E when adding ing? This was taught across the nation. Everybody can say it. Guess what? There's a lot of suffixes in English besides ing. And I don't know why this is nationwide other than maybe it rhymes. But it doesn't answer anything about what to do if there's any suffix other than ing. So this is not a good rule. But how many of you were taught drop the E when adding a vowel suffix? No one in this room. Okay, usually there's like one or two people. One person. This is close, but not quite. So we're going to discover it. We drop the E in like before the vowel suffix ing. A vowel suffix starts with a vowel to make liking. We drop the E in like to make likable. We drop the E in service before the vowel suffix ed to make serviced. Why do we not drop it in serviceable? What would this say? Guess what? You need to know why the E was needed to know if you can drop it. And once you know this, you can drop E's perfectly in our language and add those suffixes to silent E words. So we need the E so it says serviceable. We drop the E in notice to make noticing. Why do we not drop it in notice to make noticeable? Because that would say noticable. Do you see how helpful this is? Some of these are some of the most frequently misspelled words in English by strong writers. And by the way, what happens when we can't spell? We get distracted. We can no longer focus on the higher things and the thoughts because we're focused on the details. And I'm not saying spelling is the be-all and end-all. Writing and communicating our thoughts is, but this has to be automatic. This has to be learned to such a level that it is a tool that we implement without thought to be able to communicate. Okay, and my last story for you about a person, but this is amazing, and I think Allie has a voice to share with us that can't be missed. So my friend Katie sat on an airplane next to Allie. And in that course of that flight from Minneapolis to California, Allie described herself as stupid 5 times. And I think by the end of this, you are going to agree with me that she must be near the end of genius. But she felt stupid, so stupid that she was communicating this to a stranger. And what came out is that she actually struggled with reading to the point that she couldn't read well enough so that her daughter would have to read recipes to her. I mean, she really struggles with reading. And so Allie did this, and Katie did this. She gave Allie a copy of Uncovering the Logic of English on the flight from her purse. And then Katie calls me as she gets off the flight, and she goes, Denise, guess what? I had this great conversation, and I gave this woman named Allie this book. And I have to tell you that on that phone call, I was like, Katie, that's great. You just gave someone who's illiterate a book. I don't know. I was thinking I wrote that for tutors. I wrote it for teachers. I wrote it for parents. Do you know what Allie did? She went and she took that book, and a few months later, I think it was like 2 or 3 months later, she emails us. And she said, I just wanted to tell you, I just read my first Nicholas Sparks novel and comprehended it. She took those tables, taught herself the phonograms, using the phonograms, taught herself, read the rest of the book, taught herself the rules, and then said, I'm going to read a novel now. And she got it. And then a few months later, she emailed us again and said, oh, by the way, I've bought myself a Kindle, and I'm discovering that I really like political science. Wow. These are the tools she needed to be successful. And I'm going to challenge you that these are the tools that are going to explode reading in your kids. Don't forget those. So let's go ahead and talk about morphology and vocabulary development, because this is an important part, and I think you're going to love this. And it will give you some tools to bring this back to level as opposed to educated adults having so much more. So we are now on page 75. Okay. Morphology. Okay, phonograms are about sounds, the most elemental part of our language and of written language and of spoken language. If you think about it this way, all of spoken language is the 45 sounds of English rearranged in different ways to form words. It is the most basic part of the language. The next basic part of the language that, like if you step up, is morphemes, units of meaning. And oftentimes we don't realize how much meaning is embedded in words. So we have a root like tract. What kind of words, start calling them out, that you can think of that use the root tract? Tractor, contract, traction, attract, detract, retract, extract. We could go on and on and on. Actually, there's lots and lots of words that use tract. And tract literally means to pull. So let's look at just a few of them. What does a tractor do? It pulls. If the prefix re means back, so retract literally means to pull back. Con, I think con and com, they're the same prefix, is my favorite prefix, if you can have a favorite prefix. I'm a total nerd, so I can have a favorite prefix in the language. Do you know what con and com mean? With and together. So a contract literally means to pull together. Isn't that a beautiful image of what it means when you write a contract? You're going to agree to pull together. And a contractor is someone who goes to a job site and pulls all the trades and organizes them and pulls them together. X means out. Extract literally means to pull out. D means down or away. Detract literally means to pull away. I learned all these words in isolation. I never saw the relationships between them. So to develop a large vocabulary, I had to memorize lots of individual words. Do you see how when you begin to learn prefixes and suffixes and roots, you begin to have the pieces to put that together? So what are some words you can think of with struct? Construct, structure, restructure, destructive, destruct. Okay, what do you think struct means? Build. Here are all the derivatives of struct. There's a lot of them. So to destruct, down away, means literally to build down. To instruct means to build in. Ob means against. To obstruct means literally to build against. Okay, you want to prepare kids to succeed on standardized tests. Standardized tests are the most shallow level of learning because they are multiple choice. You teach kids these roots and they have a vocabulary word they have to figure out the meaning of, and they see struct in it, they know it has something to do with build, and they've only got 4 choices. Do you see how powerful this is? This is how you get really high SAT scores in vocabulary, and this is how you build a large vocabulary. Now, this is a very personal example for me. I was at a professional development conference. Someone put up the root psi, and I thought, oh, that's one I don't know. And does anyone have any, what kind of words is it in? Science, conscience. So here's some words. Conscience, it literally means knowledge. So science means knowledge. Conscience, with knowledge. If you're conscious, you're with knowledge. Omni means all. Omniscience is all knowing. And then they put up the word prescient, which can also be said prescient. And I've looked it up. It's both ways in the dictionary. People always ask me if I choose one of them. And I thought, that's so cool. I've never seen that word before, but I know instantly that it means before knowledge. Now, I share this for this reason. I've read a lot. I've read lots of the classics. I read the news every day. I've read volumes. I went to grad school. I think I'm highly literate. And I thought a couple years ago when an instructor put this up, I'd never seen prescient before. But I knew it meant before knowledge. Since then, I've read it in the news, many, many times. Okay, why did I not learn this? I didn't get it from context all those years, did I? I don't know why. And I skipped it. I think I was okay without it. But it would be better if I had gotten it. And here's the thing. We need to teach kids to learn the meaning of words from context. But if we teach them roots, they have yet another tool. Do you see it? They have yet another tool in their toolbox to go, there's a word I don't know. Now, I'm going to use a text that's above your 4th graders, that's in a high school setting, to just give you some examples of this. You have the text from Aristotle. It's clearly better that property should be private, but the use of it common. The special business of the legislator is to create and mend this benevolent disposition. You get to a text like this, you have much more complex sentence structure, you have bigger words, you get to the word benevolent. It's really important you know what it means because you're trying to create this in people, but you're not sure what it means. Okay, what if you don't know the root for it? You can begin thinking, what other words do I know that have bene in them? Benefit. Is a benefit good? Yeah, something about a benefit. What else? Beneficial. Benign. Benefactor. Benediction. You can give them the skill to begin to go, what other words do I know that might have something related? Oh, wow, now I have a tool to try to understand that word. You're teaching in the reading camp. You're teaching a word like court. You're doing science experiments for your inquiry piece. And how can you help kids understand this word? You're measuring in quarts or something. Well, you could talk about how many quarters are there in a dollar. 4. How many musicians in a quartet? 4. If you get something quarterly, how often do you get it? 4. What does quart mean? It literally means 4. And when we teach these relationships, we give them lots of hooks. We teach them how they relate. And when I taught this to a district-wide professional development, a high school teacher came up to me afterwards and said, I always forget how many quarts in a gallon. Thank you so much. I mean, it might be obvious to some of you, but without explicit teaching, some of us are going to miss it. And that's okay. There's things, we shouldn't have to guess at it and figure it all out ourselves. Another one, we have the word malicious. We can begin thinking about the prefix mal. What do you know about mal? It's bad, malfunction, malnourished, malignant. And if you're reading Harry Potter for the very first time and you meet Malfoy, what do you know? He's bad. And you don't even have to wonder through the whole series like everybody else does. Because you know something. She uses so many roots. She plays with them. She gives so many clues if you know roots. By the way, introduce kids to that. Do you know how much fun they'll have reading Harry Potter for those clues? It's exciting to see. I'm going to skip a few more examples for the sake of going on. I'll give you one more, and that's Acropolis. So you're reading about history maybe in your inquiry time. What other words do you know with acro? Acrobat. Acro literally means height. So the Acropolis, polis is city. Minneapolis, Indianapolis. So Acropolis literally means a city up high. That's what it is. That's why it was named that. And you can teach those roots. And vocabulary development is also interwoven into the Essentials program. All right, this research study. Remember this from the beginning? 80 hours of instruction. Do you know what they were teaching? How the language works. They were answering kids' questions about English. And in 80 hours, they were bringing kids below the 30th percentile up to reading. And some of the most fascinating studies have to do with functional MRI research, where they show that kids who are struggling readers read with the front right side of their brain, and strong readers read with the back left side of their brain. And in 80 hours of instruction, they can not only bring those kids from being struggling readers to strong readers, they can show that their brain function changes on MRIs to look like that of strong readers. And so what I heard in a presentation by Dr. Reed Lyon, one of the leading neurologists who's been doing some of this research for many years, is he said, which I thought was interesting, he said, you as teachers, you as parents, you as tutors, can do what I as a brain surgeon cannot do. You can rewire the brain through sound instruction. He also went on to say that he thought, if I understood him correctly, he said he thought that if you can rewire the brain in 80 hours, those kids do not have a disability. They were not taught correctly. That's not your fault, no guilt. You can't teach what you don't know. But do you agree? I mean, if you can rewire the brain, you can bring them up. This is an issue of how we're teaching. And I had a question for Dr. Lyon after this presentation, and he had to catch a flight, and I'm very persistent sometimes. So I hopped out of my chair as he's walking down the aisle, and I followed him. And he's hustling out, and I'm literally going like this, Dr. Lyon, I have a question for you, and I have to know. And this is what I asked. I said, what are those struggling readers doing with the front right side of their brain? Because we know that the strong readers are listening to it as an auditory text. And he said, we don't know, but what we do know is that's the visual center, and that's the higher order thinking center. And this is what I thought. This was my aha. May or may not be right. You decide. You can think about it yourself, and the researchers can dig into it. I thought they're reading sight words. They're guessing. They're using the clues from context. They are working incredibly hard trying to make meaning, and they're using the wrong part of their brain. They're supposed to be listening to this text automatically so that they can now think about the higher order skills as concepts. Do you see what I'm saying? And I also want to point out something, again, about shame about this, because when he said that, it actually hit me really hard as a parent, and it hit me hard as I thought about some of my students, because I thought, oh man, do you know what I've said? I've said to kids, why aren't you trying? Why aren't you focused? And I shamed them. And I thought, you know what? They were trying really, really hard, but they weren't making the right connections. And so just a thought for you, I mean, as you're going through the weeks of summer reading camp. Okay, I want to share this with you as well. This is Foundations. This is original beginning sort of pilot study research. Logic of English is in process of doing an initial pilot study with our Foundations program with a school in Minnesota. And this is a kindergarten classroom. And I am sharing this with you because I think it's a rather profound beginning of our study. So this is the Dibbles composite scores for this class coming in of, I'm thinking there were 70 students. My notes are gone. I think there were, does it say? 65, thank you. 65 students. This is their distribution coming in. So you can see this is a suburban school. So they are distributed with the bell curve not in the middle, and there are some kids definitely towards the top, but there are some kids at the bottom. Okay? And this is, they are percentile ranking scores in December. Do you see the movement for Dibbles? Now, something else you need to know about Dibbles, if you don't give it, is that in the Dibbles ranking, they do not test phonemic awareness at the beginning of kindergarten. They begin to assess phonemic awareness in December of the kindergarten year. So I can't tell you where they came in, but I ran these numbers so many times because I thought there was something wrong with them. This is this school's, all 65 kids, percentile rankings against the country of phonemic awareness skills in December. There were 32 or 35 kids in the 99th percentile in phonemic awareness. The number one predictor that a child in kindergarten will become a strong reader. They're playing those games that I was talking to you about. And their teachers are telling me they're begging them for those games. So I want to encourage you that those activities, this is a short period of time with very young students. You can make much more progress, much more quickly with older students. And guess what? You've already laid some of the groundwork. You're filling in gaps. Okay. There is a section in here on comprehension skills. And we have a few minutes. And I just want to talk about this from this perspective. It's really important as we think about comprehension to really be asking kids questions from many, many levels. Oftentimes we focus on comprehension just as knowledge and facts-based questions, and that's important. But we can't leave it there. So in the Essentials Readers, which, like I said, they are not in print yet. So if you look for them on our website, they're not there. But if your schools decide to do this for summer reading camp, we'll give you the files. You can have them for free. We'd love for you guys to use this. But with knowledge, you can begin to ask questions. This is only lesson 12. So if you're doing a lesson every single day, and the 5th lessons, by the way, in Essentials are currently all assessment lessons. So at the very end in the appendix, you have a sample schedule for summer reading camp of some ways that you could lay it out or some goals you could have per week. I mean, you're talking week 3. You've got a multi-page text on this. You can begin asking questions. Where do starfish live? How do they eat? Specific things like that. You can talk about what is Felix feeling throughout the story? What is the meaning of the word sullen? And this is where Kimber Iverson's, she's a brilliant writer. She builds in some patterns where the kids are going to encounter synonyms for feeling upset or and they're going to happen at the end of every paragraph. And you're going to be able to give kids some of those clues to practice discovering meaning from the context and things. But we also need to be working in summer reading camp, not just on that, but on comprehension skills. And comprehension takes it to a higher level, such as main idea. It's writing keyword outlines. It's looking a little bit deeper. By the way, this is lesson 8. We have a unit on weather. This is lesson 7. We can ask who's the main character. And in this story, there's some inferences issues as well that the kids can do. Then we can also look at application. And I would strongly encourage you in summer reading camp to have some activities. Like you'll notice, here's lesson 8. This is week 2, day 5 possibly, or day 4 of week 2. You can have a weather experiment. They can read it and conduct the experiment through reading. Now they are applying what they're doing to an activity. You need to get kids using reading for things they care about and things that interest them and as they're moving around. Here we talked about the inferences, and I am blowing through this really quick. We can do analysis. It's really great to begin to teach kids the difference between fiction and nonfiction. Give them stacks of books, have them be librarians and categorize them. I mean, and once again, make it hands-on, not like, let's circle the name of the fiction text on the picture and let's circle. I mean, no, get them involved, because what do we do in real life with texts? We use them to accomplish real things that we really care about. Then there can be synthesis. Here, this is a text from lesson 14. And notice, we're now up to 4-page texts. And this is about William Comcobway. And this is a fabulous story. If you don't know this story as an adult, go and look up The Boy and the Windmill, I think is the title of the book, New York Times bestseller. But here's a summary of this gentleman's life and how he grew up in Malawi. And there was a famine, and he went off, and as a child, he could no longer go to school, and he went and tried to figure out, how can I continue my learning? He went to the library, he got out books about electronics, this is all in this text, and then he begins to build windmills for his village to solve how to pump water. And when you do this, you can now take a text, we're talking, 3-4 weeks into the session of summer reading camp, you can then begin to say to kids, okay, what are some really interesting issues off here? Now let's go to the library and let's find some books this week about Malawi. Oh, you're interested in that. Oh, you're interested in famine. Oh, you'd like to build a windmill. And now do you see how you can begin to get these groups that are stated in your legislation going, and you are now building to this. And then there's evaluation. So this could be as simple from the first week as, which was your favorite text this week? But it can also be as complex of, how would you have responded if you were William living in a village with famine? Would you have gone to the library? Would have that been your first thought? So you can begin to interact on those higher order skills. And some of you have asked me about foundation, so I'm just going to briefly say, in our K1 program, which doesn't have to do with summer reading camps, we also build. The first readers have no pictures in them. The kids read the words and cut them out and glue them in, because we don't want them picture reading. They need to read the words to create the reader. But the readers grow. They become short stories, fiction stories. In level 3, they become nonfiction texts. They're multicultural. And I show this one because I think this is a relevant thing, even if you're not using foundations. So there's a misunderstanding in the world of reading that kids need to be able to use context to discover unknown words. I want to clarify something to you. Absolutely, yes, but they have to be able to read the word. This is not about look at the first and last letter and guess. You have to be able to read the word. So a child approaching this can read the word rickshaw just fine. Most American kids have no idea what a rickshaw is. They are going to have to read the book to find that out. Now they are using context to grow their vocabulary. That's how we use context. We don't use context to guess a word that we already know in our vocabulary. Do you see the difference here? And that's a really important distinction that we make as we're teaching reading. We should be able to read the word And then if we don't have it in our vocabulary, use the context to discover its meaning. And also use tools like the glossary and dictionaries to do that. Okay. And these are just examples about, actually I'll show you this, of real activities. A lot of these things are from foundations, but they're things like, I don't like multiple choice things. This is an activity where kids read and they have to cut out the pictures of the sheep and put them in the order of what happens. They have to read about a basketball game and draw the lines about what happened in the game. They have to solve a mystery of what are they looking for, what am I? And so I'm going to challenge you as reading teachers and summer reading camp to think like this. Now, I know you have a great deal of pressure about this, right? This is like breathing down your necks. And I know that, and it's breathing down those kids' necks. But I also want to encourage you about something, a couple things, and I hope this is encouraging. First of all, as I said, these are multiple choice tests, and some of them are better written than others. And you know what? I want to encourage us. You know what? We're smarter than those tests. And writing multiple choice questions, especially that have higher order thinking skills, is really, really hard. And there are going to be mistakes on them. And I'm in this phase in my life where I've been actually hiring people as an employer. I actually don't want to hire the people that got them all right. I want to hire all the people that found all the mistakes. I want to hire the creative thinkers. I want to hire the people that had reasons. And you know what, to give really huge kudos to my daughter's teacher, she suggested Hannah write essay answers to any that she had problems with, and she's since done that. And it's been really huge for her. So for you too, I know you have to deal with this, but here's the encouraging thing. I recently read a statistic that homeschool students test in the 85th, I think, it's over the 85th percentile in reading nationwide. Do you know one of the factors in that? None of them, I promise you, practice multiple choice tests. Do you know what they do? They read a lot. And so I just want to calm you down and go, you know what? If they read a lot, if they love reading, if they have fun with it, if they develop all the basic skills, I think they'll be okay on the tests. Most of the state tests are ridiculously long, and that may frustrate you, but there's a really good thing about that, and that's because it weeds out some of those funny things where there's just problems with the tests. And it's okay. I really think they'll be okay. But really what we're trying to do as a nation is we're trying to raise up strong readers. We're trying to raise up strong people. We're trying to raise up a generation of people who love learning, who feel confident to pursue their interests and to do it with gusto and have the tools. So yes, the tests are there. And by the way, the accountability is good. But I think we need to not focus on those fill in the bubbles for camp. Maybe give one at the end, at the beginning. Help them not stress out. But let's take away the kids' anxiety too. Just a few very specific ideas for summer reading camp. Reading workshop. We've talked a lot about what you can put in reading workshop time. Phonemic awareness, systematic phonics, morphology, fluency, spelling. You'll notice in my sample schedule that I put in your appendix that I think that you should try to wait the first 4 weeks towards reading workshop. It's okay, I think, if you put more time in reading workshop at the beginning and a little less time at the end and more time in inquiry and research at the end. I don't think you need to feel locked into every single day needs to be rigidly balanced out like this. I think you need to meet the needs of the students and do so in a way that makes sense. And so one of the tools you could use is this. If your district isn't using essentials, that's fine. You've got a copy of Uncovering. At least begin to answer your students' questions about why is there a silent E in have. Begin to ask those questions. Begin to teach words through analysis. There's so much you can do interwoven with anything that you're doing with your district that begins to give these skills. Teach the phonograms. This is super easy. Introduce all 74 throughout camp. Writing workshop, I would suggest you scale it through the weeks. So weeks 1 and 2, descriptive writing, we talked about this. Weeks 3 and 4, you are, in weeks 3 and 4, if you're doing essentials, you'll gain verbs and you'll learn what a sentence is. And the students can then begin learning how to write strong sentences. We often jump to composition, and creative students don't necessarily mind not knowing how to write a sentence, but many of your 3rd and 4th graders are like hung up going, I don't know what a sentence is, I don't know how to write. So if you give them those tools in week 3 and 4, you can work on writing sentences, writing dialogues, writing very discrete, shorter text. You can work on writing keyword outlines and composing orally from an outline where they're going to read a text, write keywords, and then retell. Those are the skills for composition without putting the burden on to write the whole thing. Weeks 5 and 6, you can begin to take those keyword outlines and they generate new ones, and they can then begin writing short paragraphs. Keyword outlines, fabulous reading comprehension activity as well. And I would suggest in weeks 7 and 8, you develop some sort of project. My suggestion would be to develop a class magazine where you're going to publish. And you're going to take and show what they've learned through something like articles that they write or a topic you explore together, and that every student's going to get a copy of that magazine or that newspaper that they're going to bring home to show how far they've come. So that would be my recommendation. Those are ideas. I know there's a lot of factors you have to work with. Inquiry and research. I would suggest in week 1 and 2, or week 1, you choose some common core text or some state standard text. Read aloud from science and history. Don't be afraid to read aloud. You're building their academic language. You're building their enjoyment of text, and pick things you think will engage them. Go to the library, find books that are going to be interesting. In weeks 2, if you want, you can take and build a unit off of the Essentials reader. I lost mine, but there's a unit on weather, there's a text on weather, there's a unit on astronauts. You could use that to expand into other things and develop a whole unit through inquiry and research. Week 3 has something about starfish. You could continue to read about that. There's other texts each of these weeks. There's something each day, but week 4 is William Comcabwa. There's also geothermal energy in our readers. And so you can expand. Week 5, by the time you get to week 5, here's where you're going to be. The kids are going to have almost all of the phonograms and all the rules. And do you know what? We have so many people contact us and say, we're in lesson 2025 and my child's reading at a 4th or 5th grade level now. Can you imagine? You're now halfway through camp. Your kids have a lot of the skills to read at grade level. Now you get to do for the rest of camp grade level sort of things. So in week 5, you're going to be transitioning. Some of those kids are taking off. Some of them are not, because it's okay, right? Some are going to need even more practice. Utilize your volunteers. Week 5, you could do something about Robert Small's fabulous story in our readers in the Civil War, or you can take something from your standards. It's up to you. These are ideas trying to cast an arcing vision for you. And here you can start giving kids transition or an option. They can present orally, they could present in writing. Where are they at? Be sensitive. Don't trigger that shame. Be really building them. By 6, you could be doing display boards where they're not long text, shorter text. They're creating them. End of the week, something they take home. And then 7 and 8, kind of building to that idea of a class project is something we're doing together. And by the way, by the time you get to week 6, you don't even need our readers. Because you've got everything you need to read any book. Go to the library, let them explore. And at any point the kids start opening books, go, have at it. The world is open. And if the child's still holding back, that's okay. Let them decide. Because some people, guess what? You and I, we needed just a little bit of this information to explode in reading. Some of these kids are going to need a bigger and bigger percentage before it just they have enough to make sense. So we are at time. And I can take a few questions if you have them. Oh, wait, no, I have one last slide because I think this is cool. And it's really short. And that's this. As teachers, I want us to rethink language arts from this. If you're like me, you think of you think of language arts like grammar, spelling, handwriting, vocabulary, composition, phonics, reading. There's all these different curriculums, all these different things, and you're like, there's not enough time in the day for all of it. What I want you to do is to begin to think about this as a whole. This is language arts. When you teach handwriting, you're teaching reading. When you teach grammar, you're teaching reading, because some kids need to know the grammar to be able to understand and comprehend. When you're teaching phonics, you're teaching comprehension. And when you begin to integrate these and mix these and grow these like that tree, it becomes less stressful, because you don't have to feel like, oh my goodness, I spent too much time on handwriting today. You can go, no, we're working on those sounds. We're working on writing and composition. And so that's just my challenge for you. So summer reading camps are on the website, and I can take questions. Yes?
Denise, I just want to ask one, because I think it's important, and that is, you're going to be, on the summer reading training you're doing, June 10th, they get to break out into small groups and learn some of these things further. Is that correct?
4 days, yep, and it's a lot of practicum hands-on time. You will begin practice teaching. You'll be doing the dictating. It's in a format very different from this. It's small amounts of lecture, go and do it. Come back and discuss it. Small amounts of lecture, go back and do it. Very, very different. We want to arm you with the tools, and we want you to feel confident in the teaching methods as well. Yes?
My earlier question about ease being put in writing.
Oh, yes. So back to your ease. You need to know the 9 reasons for a silent E. And when kids know that, then they know when to use them and when to not use them. So it's just having the linguistics knowledge. Any other questions? No? All right. Well, thank you so much for coming and spending your day here. I hope it was helpful to you.